Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. One of the most anticipated characters in Wuthering Waves, Camellya, has sprouted into Wuthering Waves. In today's video, you'll learn everything you need to know about Camellya and whether or not she's a good pick for your account. Camellya, she's had the entire Wuthering Waves community eagerly anticipating her release ever since her slightly sus interaction with Rover. And well, she's here and very unlikely to disappoint us highly cultured gamers who appreciate the fine art of aerial acrobatics, as she masterfully implements her Olympic gold medal worthy gymnastics performance to murder her opponents. Camellya is a Havoc character specialized in dealing a lot of damage in a very fancy looking way. Also, quick note, this video was filmed on the media server and things may be subject to change upon the official release. Please check the comments below to see if anything changed. As usual, we'll go through her kit, her echoes and stats, weapons, sequences, teams, showcases, and of course, my opinion on Camellya at the end of the video.
Don't run! Keep the dance going!
Okay, so I gotta be 100% honest. Camellya's kit looks quite complicated, resembling Weird Uncle Joe's conspiracy wall trying to prove that birds aren't real and are just government spy bots. However, in practice, it ends up being relatively straightforward once you're familiar with it. And that's why I'm here, to make sure that I understand her kit so you can understand it too. And once we get to the full rotation, it actually ends up being pretty simple. Moving on over to her kit, her basic attacks exist and will honestly rarely be used. Her resonance skill puts her into what I'll be calling Vine mode, where she's perpetually suspended in the air. In this mode, her basic attacks are replaced with a new 4-hit combo. Holding the basic attack button down on the third part will cause her to spin like she's trying to win an intense Beyblade tournament. Using her skill while in Vine mode will cause her to slam the ground and thus exit Vine mode and bring her back down to earth. Up next we have this giant Forte multiplier, Ephemeral, which I'll just be calling Super Skill. Now confusingly, it doesn't actually use her Forte bar, but instead uses her Concerto. When Camellya has 100 Concerto, her resonance skill will be replaced by Super Skill. Super Skill costs 70 Concerto energy and has a long 25-second cooldown, which is indicated by this debuff looking icon. After using Super Skill, now Camellya enters Super Vine mode. Her Super Skill fills up her Forte bar, and her Forte bar looks much more sinister than before. That's how you can tell she's in Super Vine mode. In Super Vine mode, she basically does around 50% more damage with everything besides her Super Skill and Liberation, and as she does more damage, she consumes her Forte ticks. Super Vine mode ends when you swap her off or spend all of the Forte ticks. Also important, for some reason, while in Super Vine mode, she doesn't generate any energy for her Resonance Liberation. Fortunately for us though, her Resonance Liberation is just a very straightforward nuke with a long 25-second cooldown.
Don't run! Keep the dance going!
And the last key to this Camellya puzzle is her intro skill. Her intro skill fully fills up her Forte bar with 100 petals. If we do the aforementioned Vine mode Beyblade combo, we spend almost the entirety of her Forte bar. For every 10 petals of her Forte bar that we spend, it generates 4 Concerto and 1 Crimson Bud, which essentially just increases the amount of damage that her super skill does. Are you following me? No? Good, because neither am I, and I wrote this damn guide. Hopefully though, the full rotation will make all of this make some sense. First, we intro her onto the skill, and then we use her Liberation. Then we use her skill to enter Vine mode and use the Beyblade combo. This will actually fully fill up her Concerto, allowing her to use her super skill. Now she's in Super Vine mode, where you can do another Beyblade combo and end it with her skill, which brings her back to grounded state and up to 100 Concerto, again, for her to now outro. Basically, she starts in Vine mode, uses super skill, and goes into Super Vine mode. During all this, she's filling up her Concerto twice. This long rotation lines up with her long 25-second super skill and liberation cooldowns. Fortunately, this rotation, along with mixing in some dodge counters as necessary, will be her bread and butter rotation that works in most scenarios. But yeah, if you're still confused, don't worry, as are most of us. Leave a comment down below if you're part of the Confuzzled gang or if you're part of the Enlightened gang. Fortunately, she's one of those characters that you just have to use for a while to really understand her kit. She does have a lot more additional details to her kit, but this guide is largely to serve as an introduction to start using her. Sorry my voice sounds terrible for certain parts of this video since I got sick after recording the first part, but it is what it is. Anyway, for her talent priority, looking at her damage distribution, we can see that a vast majority of it comes from basic attack damage. And this basic attack damage comes from her skill and forte, which both do basic attack damage. As such, I recommend leveling her skill, then her forte, then her liberation, and finally her basics, and her intro is the lowest priority. And up next, it's the echoes. No one wants to hear a dying man's raspy voice, so let's get through this build section a bit faster than usual. For her echo set, the 5-piece Havoc set, Sun Sinking Eclipse, is a great option. And for the equipped Echo, both the Dreamless and Crownless are viable options. With the Dreamless, you can do a very low field time nuke, thanks to being able to quick swap it. However, there is a longer rotation where you can incorporate Crownless's buff by dash canceling it right before her liberation and super skill. Camellya is uniquely able to incorporate Crownless's buff due to much of her kit still working while she's in midair. Either way, both options work well for Camellya. Now, another great option for her, since her kit discourages quick swapping and she's on field for a very long time, is the 5-piece Lingering Tunes. And it's actually quite competitive to the 5-piece Havoc set. As such, you can use either set depending on which one you have better stats and substats for. As for the main stats, is the usual 4-3-3-1-1 setup with crit, Havoc, and Havoc main stats. If you're using the 5-piece Havoc set, then replacing one of the Havoc pieces with attack percent is perfectly fine for both the Emerald of Genesis and her signature weapon. As for substats, it's the usual, get as much crit and attack percent as possible, followed by basic attack damage. As for energy regen, I found that around 120% energy recharge was enough to get her liberation most of the time.
Don't run! Keep the dance going!
And up next, we have her weapon options. As per usual Wuthering Waves fashion, her signature weapon, the Red Spring, is by far her best option, nearly 33% better than any of the 4-star options. However, the Emerald of Genesis is a serviceable free-to-play friendly option if you chose that weapon from the strongbox, dealing around 86% of her signature weapon's damage. Overall, it's hard to go wrong with pulling for her weapon if you do plan to invest more into her, especially if you don't have the Emerald of Genesis. Finally, we have Camellya's sequences. Since this part always has the worst retention, here's some hidden cam footage of our favorite plant girl at her home. Her sequence 1 basically just increases her crit damage by 28%. She also won't get smacked around during her super skill, which actually happens quite a lot. Her sequence 2 makes her super skill do a lot more damage, and her sequence 3 increases her liberations damage and gives her attack percent during her super vine mode. Sequence 4 boosts her normal attack damage, and sequence 5 boosts her intro-outro damage. Sequence 6 needs more testing, but it looks like you're able to extend a rotation with another super skill and super vine mode. It's worth mentioning that at sequence 6, her rotation is potentially so long that you'll need Shorekeeper sequence 1 to keep up the buffs for Camellya. By sequence 6, Camellya should be doing over twice the DPS of a sequence 0 Camellya.
Don't run! Keep the dance going!
Fortunately, when it comes to teams for Camellya, it is extremely straightforward. Because Camellya mostly deals normal attack damage, this leads us to the very obvious Sanhua choice for a teammate. Do keep in mind though that Sanhua's outro skill only lasts for 14 seconds, and Camellya tends to have a longer rotation. But still, at the moment, Moonlit Sanhua is the best choice for buffing normal attack damage, thanks to her low field time and 38% basic attack damage amplify. For the third slot, it's the usual recommended healer slot. Overall, I'd say Shorekeeper is the best choice, especially considering the fact that her 25-second liberation cooldown lines up perfectly with Camellya's 25-second cooldown. And of course, if you don't have Shorekeeper, Verena is the next best option, providing extremely low field time and, more importantly, a consistent theme of plant-based characters. Now, outside of the very obvious Camellya plus Sanhua plus healer team, we don't have many great options. But let's say you really are desperate to scrap together a third team, you could try Danjin for her Havoc outro and Baizhi as a healer, but overall I don't recommend teams outside of the Camellya plus Sanhua plus healer team, because that team is just going to be really good. And one last thing to note about Camellya is that she's not the best candidate for a quick swap playstyle, as you want to get the most out of Sanhua's outro for the first 14 seconds, and after that you'll be in Super Vine mode, and switching cancels her Super Vine mode. Perhaps in the future, Kuro will release a character that has a longer normal attack outro, but we'll just have to wait and see. Alright, we've reached the showcase section of this video. Now, there is actually quite a lot to talk about when it comes to Camellya besides the stuff that I included in the kit portion. Like, for example, one of her mega traces, or the major talents, that it only activates when you use her plunge attack, which is encouraging you to do another rotation, which I will also include on the screen as well in terms of that rotation as well, but it includes a couple additional text and inputs, which, earlier I wanted to kind of keep it simple. So yeah, this one though is another good rotation. I don't think I did it in this video, or at least in this showcase portion, but still, I definitely wanted to just mention that without having to re-edit a large portion of the video from earlier. So anyway, though, we can see here that this is, in my opinion, my go-to team for Camellya is to actually use Shorekeeper as well as Sanhua. Sanhua, of course, having notoriously low field time, just taking very low field time to get her outro, and buffing basic attack damage. And we can see here that when Camellya comes on, she can use her skill into Liberation in order to start spinning to winning, and yeah. Now, in terms of her dodging in midair, I found it to be, quite reliable in comparison to normally dodging in midair. Didn't exactly test, how many items and stuff she has, but it seemed pretty reasonable to me. Now, in this case, I think the rotation didn't quite go as planned, but yeah, so because Camellya's rotations are so long, despite having, a potentially static rotation in practice, unlike a character like Jinshi who has a really short rotation, you're very likely going to deviate from the standard rotation. So you can incorporate a few tricks like, kind of the jump while she's in her skill, which does an attack, into a plunge, so that way your skill is off cooldown. Yeah, and there's just a lot of little technical things that really honestly kind of require a more advanced guide to cover. But at least for now, for kind of a rough introduction, this is hopefully good enough for you guys to kind of get started. So yeah, when it comes to dealing Havoc damage, we can see here that Camellya just does a lot of it, right? And her long rotation, as well as 25-second cooldowns, line up really well with Shorekeeper, so it's no surprise that this team is looking like it's going to be a very solid team for Camellya. Now, yeah, we'll just see that she can spin to win. Now, it is worth mentioning that the regular Vine mode does a lot less damage, because after you consume the buds and then you get a bunch of the kind of bud stack things, sorry guys, I always forget the names of all these things. Then the follow-up damage you do deals a bit more damage. Now, because that thing was just jumping in midair and you can't really hit it, I don't know, I just used Dreamless for some reason. Because why not? Now this time I skip Shorekeeper's part of the rotation, so that way we can just quickly finish it off.
Don't run. Keep the dance going.
So yeah, Camellya is another strong 5-star featured DPS character, this time dealing the magenta colored Havoc damage numbers. She is definitely the premium 5-star Havoc DPS character. Camellya has an interesting and unique playstyle where she's able to stay in the air, doing massive damage AoE attacks with a couple nukes throughout. Camellya also has a longer rotation than most of the other DPS characters, which actually does have its benefits, as it can make her very compatible with long rotation supports like Shorekeeper, and who knows, perhaps in the future there will be a character more fitting for Camellya than Sanhua as well. Overall, it's hard to go wrong with her if you need another strong main DPS character for your account. Let me know what you think about Camellya down in the comments below. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.